Welcome. My name is Corinne Waldow. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Boulder Chamber. I want to thank you for attending this week's session on both indoor and outdoor recreation or recreation. You have a lot of changes this week from the previous week as the new order was put into effect last week. We're here to answer your questions, provide you information, and offer opportunities for you to provide feedback. I'll be asking you some poll questions towards the end about resources, checklists, and so forth. So please answer those if you're able to. If you have questions, please put them in either the Q&A or the chat feature, and I'll ask them on your behalf at this point. We still have a lot of people on these calls. At this time, I'm going to hand it off to Mary Olson with Boulder County Public Health.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to go over some general information, and then my colleague Marnie is going to give you some specific updates for recreation. And of course, we'll list all the resources that we have and link you to those throughout this presentation. And you can link to those once you get the recorded webinar. So just a reminder of where we are. In May, several municipalities and the county issued their own face covering orders. At the beginning of the month, Safer at Home was extended through the end of June. June 1st, short-term rentals were allowed again. And then last week, all of those proposed guidelines for recreation were due on Wednesday. And then we did have the 6th amended stay-at-home order that incorporated a lot of those changes for the recreation industry. The long-term outlook for the coronavirus here in Colorado, Safer at Home will certainly continue and be with us for a long time. It will change, but it is definitely not going to go away. This is our new normal until we have a vaccine, treatment, or if we are lucky enough to develop herd immunity. So this will likely be with us for months. The virus continues to spread rapidly around the world. We're at over 7 million people infected worldwide, and we do have, unfortunately, a couple of neighbor states that are seeing upticks in cases. So we still have to be really vigilant. So like I was saying, COVID-19 is still just as contagious and dangerous as it has been. We really do encourage you to stay at home as much as possible. Compliance with the public health orders is obligatory, but we are not here to answer specific questions you may have about your business and compliance. Any legal questions, we really encourage you to contact an attorney. We cannot give you legal advice. Face coverings. Pretty much when you leave your home, you should have a face covering with you. If you cannot maintain 6 feet of distance in Boulder County, you are required to have that face covering on in public. We will link you to some resources for both your employees and patrons at your businesses. And we did update our face covering script. So that will help you guide people that are coming to your establishments who may not have a mask on or may not have one with them. And that should hopefully help you out. So as always, you can go to the Boulder County Public Health website to get more information. That's that first link there. The second link is for the state's website, also incredibly helpful. And then several others. You should be in discussion with your peer agencies, your licensing agency, and of course you can get direction from your local municipality as well. Outbreaks. What to do if you experience an outbreak at your business. If you have 2 or more employees that have a confirmed or suspected case within a 14-day period, you do need to fill out the COVID-19 outbreak report form on the CDPHE website. That's linked here, and that needs to go straight to Boulder County Public Health. At that point, we will help determine what actions you need to take to move forward. Okay, now starting to transition, we do have a couple resource spotlights for you this week, since the latest amended order did provide a lot of changes for recreation. So we're linking you to that there. And there's also some updated general personal recreation guidance on the state website as well. And then we have great news. We heard you. Boulder County Public Health is going to move forward with the variance process. This is news today, so it is in development right now. We don't have one available at the moment, but we are really starting to work on figuring that out and providing potentially an online form for you. So please be on the lookout for that. It might take us a little while to figure it out, but that is forthcoming. And we really do hope that that will help address some of your concerns about the inconsistencies in the state orders. Just a reminder of all of our webinars on Tuesday afternoons. We have the sector specific ones. Wednesday nights, we do have the Spanish session. And then on Thursdays, the general session for your general questions. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Marnie, and she's going to talk about many, many changes that happened in recreation this week. Marnie, I think you're muted.
I know. Am I unmuted yet? Thank you. I could not get it. Good afternoon, everyone. There have been a lot of changes in the last week. Last week, we shared with you some draft guidance, and a lot of changes were incorporated, I think, as a result of that draft guidance and the feedback that was received. So I hope that that is welcomed. You know, it's still not perfect, but a lot has changed. I'm going to start here. Personal recreation is what the state is speaking to. They've got two sections. One under personal recreation is what it's titled. The other one is outdoor recreation. And so I'm going to talk about personal recreation first, which includes both indoor and outdoor. But think about it from a personal standpoint, and you'll understand more as I go along. So big news, gyms, recreation centers, and indoor pools are open. There are capacity limits. You can have a capacity of up to 25% or 50 people, whichever is fewer, and that's per room. I think a lot of this you're probably familiar with. You got to maintain social distancing. Sharing equipment is discouraged. If any equipment is shared, like in your weight room perhaps, you need to clean and disinfect the equipment between uses, between individuals using that equipment. Restrooms and lockers, restrooms and showers are open. Lockers, I believe, I did not update this one, I apologize. I think that lockers can be open. How, now, Corinne, do you think now?
No, lockers are closed. They want to discourage the people congregating and not using them. So restrooms and showers are open, lockers, no.
Okay, thank you for that. That was one thing I was unclear about. Organized rec, both adult and youth league sports can occur, 10 or fewer inside. So that's everything on the indoor front. Outdoors activities, generally speaking, an outdoor activity that you want to do, the kind of streamlined guidance is activities can happen with 10 or fewer people. Again, maintaining social distance. There are a few caveats that are a little different where they're offering some guidance that's a little different. For instance, playgrounds and outdoor sports facilities such as tennis, pickleball, basketball courts, which they call out, can have no more than 25 people. And they're suggesting that high-touch surfaces be cleaned and disinfected frequently. Outdoor swimming pools can go up to 50% capacity, again with a limit of no more than 50 people. In this case, the frequently touched surfaces need to be disinfected and cleaned every hour, including bathrooms. One thing I want to say for both indoor and outdoor swimming pools that's not on the slide but is in the guidance is that the state strongly encourages that you limit pool activity to lap swimming. But you can, if you'd like to permit open swimming, you can, but they want to stress that it's important to make efforts to reduce in-pool interactions between your swimmers. Let's see, next one. Did I miss something at the bottom, by the way, because you guys are across my screen?
You got it.
Good. So, as I mentioned, the way that the state describes this, they have a fact sheet, and they also have a section that talks about personal recreation, which I just described. And then they have this other section that they call outdoor recreation. Last week when I presented it, we discussed, it was termed outdoor industry. We're back to outdoor recreation, but the first bullet kind of explains that. These are outfitters for the most part, tours, guides. Some of this certainly applies in our community, but other parts of Colorado certainly have larger outfitter operations than we might hear in Boulder County. Important, I think this is very similar to last week. Non-guided and most guided services allowed in groups up to 10. Following local policies. So if you are, working on the Western Slope or whatever, you just want to know what's happening there versus here. There's a long list of recreational activities that are included in this, such as fishing, hiking, horseback riding, canoeing, kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, ATV tours, and climbing. There's a little bit difference when it comes to the river outfitters. I'm sorry, I'm going to move my group of people here. I believe the updated guidance says that the river outfitters, rafting, and jeep tours are limited to groups of household members only. I apologize. I think that one of the things that was updated here was that those tours can go up to 2 households. 2 separate households can be in the same tour. So if you have questions about that, give me a moment and I can speak to that further. Mary, we can go to the next slide. Moving on, other parts of outdoor recreation for operators, there's a whole host of requirements. These pretty much stayed the same from last week. Limiting the number of people inside of a facility, like at the beginning and end, 10 people or less. A lot of the standard practice for COVID-19, social distancing, face coverings, symptom checks, all that guidance is provided both in the order and in the fact sheet that they put together, if you need to read that closely. Non-guided equipment rentals should follow the retail guidelines. And again, large-scale facilities such as ski resorts and various outdoor recreation entertainment activities do need local approval, like outdoor climbing walls that we might see here in our community. Anything in addition to beyond what might happen at a ski resort. Next slide. Oh, activities not authorized. The very last section of the Safer at Home relative to all of this talks about, and this is not just specific to recreation, but it's important to note that gatherings or events of more than 10 people that are not otherwise authorized are not authorized. They are not allowed as part of the amended order. Some things in particular for outdoor recreation or personal recreation would be adult and youth sport tournaments that attract crowds and travelers, fairs, festivals, parades, rodeos, receptions for more than 10 people, certain races. It is important to note that there are some competitive events that are allowed, such as running events. The guidance on that is also included in the order, but sporting events generally are for recreational sport leagues only, so that's it. Next slide, please. At the start of the fact sheet, by the way, Mary talked about a couple of links. One of those is our website. If you go to when you get the presentation and you click on the link to our Safer at Home, one of the first links in the content will get you to a state fact sheet. Something that they provide for all businesses is what are these reminders. You really should have a workplace coordinator for COVID issues, ensuring that you've got social distancing, face coverings, that people, reminding people about the good hygiene, that it's 20 seconds, washing the hands, cleaning and disinfecting, all of those things, as well as symptom checks are still recommended and in some cases required. Next slide. So one of the things we talked about and shared last week, and I just wanted to remind people is, if at any time you have questions or you have concerns or you want to offer a suggestion, you do have the ability to reach out to the state by clicking on this link. This link actually is on the footer of all the COVID pages at the state. The very first link would get you to this issues and concerns form. And it is a form that allows open-ended questions or suggestions that you can provide to the state. I believe that they're looking at it frequently because some of the stuff that I saw inconsistent yesterday has been updated in their materials today. And I think this might be one of our last slides. Certainly, you are always welcome to contact us as well. Is that the last one, Mary?
That's the last one, woo!
So if you have any questions.
I'm gonna facilitate the questions. So on the locker rooms piece, someone quoted the site as, if you go to the state personal rec site, it says that locker rooms, you need to take steps such as closing up a series of lockers to promote physical distancing and reduce gatherings in restrooms, showers, and locker rooms.
Yeah, that was my read of it too, that I guess when I read it, it's not that you have to close down all of the locker room. They really want to limit people from getting dressed in front of a locker or getting changed and that kind of thing, because people can forget that they have to be maintaining that social distance or might be less aware. So those are the types of steps that the state recommends.
And in some of the facilities, the locker rooms may be too small to permit social distancing, so they may have to close down their locker rooms if it's not possible. They have a lot of lockers on top of each other in a very small space. It may not be possible for more than one person to maintain 6-foot distancing. So we have a lot of questions about fitness classes, so indoor and outdoor fitness classes. Because it says you can have 25% capacity, up to 50 people per room, does that allow fitness classes inside to operate? And then outside, what does that look like outside?
So the guidance still for outdoor recreation would be just 10 people or fewer. And this is one of those inconsistencies. So now the new order says that you can have those classes indoors with 25% capacity or 50 people or fewer. So that's really complicated.
But you have to maintain social distancing.
Correct.
So
yeah.
Your yoga mats can't be right up against each other. You have to have 6 feet around all sides of that. So your capacity may even be less than 25% in that fitness studio room. And so let's look at the capacity again. Let's say you're a rec center and you have a swimming pool and you have a gym facility and then you have a basketball court. Each of those have capacity limits, correct? You can have 50 people in your pool if that's what you can. And you can also have 50 people per room in your facility.
As long as that's not greater than 25% of full capacity. So it's 25% or 50
up
people,
to 50.
whichever's fewer.
Whichever's lower. Right. So you're gonna look at your capacity, and if your capacity is 150 and 50% 75, your max is 50 if they can maintain 6-foot social distancing.
I think, yeah, a key piece within that is still like the flow of how are people getting between spaces. So in those shared spaces, 6 feet of social distancing still needs to be maintained. So consider your timing of classes and sessions so that not everyone's bottlenecking in possibly the one main hallway all at the same time, or use separate entrances and things like that, that the social distancing still needs to be maintained as people are moving through the facility.
The other thing that's important to note is that the county has put together a calculator for indoor spaces. And why it's important to note is there's a good diagram that shows you that when you're looking at 6 feet, you know, I might be 6 feet from that person on either side, but really in order for you to move, like you can't move without having additional space. So that space calculator takes that into consideration and bases it on a larger footprint, really.
I am putting that link in the chat right now for that space calculator. This is used by retail and some others. Now there needs to be another clarification here. So organized youth and adult recreational sports leagues, if they're outside, can they have up to 25 players excluding the coaches and referees and umpires?
That is correct.
If they're inside, they can only have 10.
That is correct.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
And
So,
actually to that point, let's see. Oh, no, that's correct. So organized recreational, 25 players outdoors or 10 players indoors. So that still means that either way, excluding the coaches.
okay. And they, and part of it is the outdoor, that fresh air flowing of, you know, the better fresh air out there.
The other part that I think has changed is that the guidance states that parents can attend the youth sport activities, but they have to remain 6 feet apart from non-household members. I think there's been some guidance out there that says pick up and drop off, but don't hang out.
Someone's asked, why can we have more people in a group exercise class inside and out? Inside than out. Shouldn't group exercise be allowed at 25 outside as well? This is very confusing, especially since you have 25 in youth sports. I think these are some of the inconsistencies you guys have seen that will be important to note in the variance feedback.
Both in the variance feedback, and then also you've always got the opportunity to share your feedback on that state open-ended form. When the draft guidance came out last week, I think they got a lot of feedback from people about the indoors and made some changes there. They might not have had as much feedback relative to the outdoors. So there could be some just reactiveness on the part of the county, who's moving as fast as we are, right? We're all trying to stay on top of this and open the state as much as possible while maintaining really good public health practices and protocols.
So do fitness studios still need to do temperature checks, or is that just personal trainers that still have to follow some of those guidelines?
You should still be doing temperature checks and symptom checks for your employees.
How about your guests or your customers in some sense?
You may do so if you wish, but the new guidance does not make it mandatory.
Does it still required under personal training, though, under the personal services guidance?
I am not sure about that.
Let's look that one up, because we get that question a lot because there's the confusion.
Okay. Yeah, and personal training is always...
Yes, actually under personal services, to protect customers, it says conduct system checks for customers seeking or receiving high contact services. So you need to ask yourself, for instance, if you're a yoga instructor and part of your practice is to make adjustments and your clients are okay with that, you should be doing those symptom checks and wearing masks in those instances where you're going to be closer than that 6 foot distance.
Yeah, and I'll just confirm, that for personal services and anyone sort of in the beauty category that are considered high contact services, so symptom checks are still required on staff and clients.
So personal training still falls under that, and there's still a maximum of 4 non-related individuals, including the personal trainer, in the personal training section of the guidance.
Correct. So those are, yes.
I know there's indoor and outdoor personal training. You can see why businesses are confused. I know you guys keeping track of the 10, the 25, the 4, the 10. I
We're
know they're
hoping
doing the best
personal
they
training
can.
would fall into this new category, and I don't know why it didn't get shifted, but it didn't yet, but that would have made more sense.
Are masks required for indoor workout classes if 6 feet social distancing can be maintained? If it can be maintained.
No, I mean, the current order says when feasible and safe. That's some of the language in there. However, I think it's a little bit hard to imagine that in a gym or in a rec center, you can always maintain 6 feet of distance. So it is highly, highly encouraged with or without. I mean, it's required if you can't maintain it, but realistically, I think it would be pretty tough to maintain that 6 feet of distance in an exercise class. If you can do it, you are allowed to remove them.
Okay. Can there be more than one person per lap in a swimming pool? Per lap lane?
We talked about that last week a little bit, or at least the guidance did, and I did not see anything specifically called out for lap swim other than the encouragement of that in all pools exclusively. But unless somebody else saw it, I think that you can increase the number of people in the lap.
Yeah, last week that the draft guidance included language that said to have one person per lane, and that we're not seeing that content or that language this week. So perhaps that's one of the changes, that they just deleted that.
Okay. So just to clarify, personal training is not under the the indoor rec and the outdoor, personal rec and indoor rec, outdoor rec fields. It's still under personal services and was not switched over.
That's correct.
Now, one thing that we will clarify is that personal training was one of the ways that some of the gyms were still finding ways to stay operational in some capacities. So, small personal training sessions to fit under the personal training. But with this update, personal training still is governed by the personal services, although now they're operating in open facilities, whereas before they were operating in closed facilities.
Correct. I think a lot of people operating under the personal trainer caveat just don't fit into it anymore, is really what's changing now. But those who are still doing a lot of those kind of private sessions have to work now with open facilities, potential if they want to work indoors, but they follow a different set of guidelines at this point.
Okay. So Cammie, since you're on the call and you do personal services and that wasn't included into the new, do trainers still need to wear gloves, or is hand washing between clients okay?
Good question. Yeah. So it says gloves when feasible, but if it's not feasible, it requires pretty thorough and frequent hand washing. And so for everyone else in the field, that would be definitely in between every session or every client. You would either need to change your gloves or wash your hands thoroughly in between sessions.
Okay.
So gloves don't have to be worn unless it makes sense and it's feasible. Masks, yes.
All right, so hopefully we do have a couple strictly personal trainers on this call who weren't operating under, just trying to maintain some sort of business during the closed gyms. So to clarify, they're going to need to look at personal services, the personal training piece. The gyms need to look at the gym piece, and again, these are some of the things to point out to both the state as well as when we do the form for the inconsistencies that may be covered by a variance. All right, so the state is permitting games with minimal travel for recs or for competitive and rec sports. Can you define travel?
I'm not going to venture a guess how the state is stating that they haven't provided guidance what travel is. Although, if we go back to overall rec activities, it says individuals may participate in local and personal recreation inside or in outside public spaces as authorized, blah, blah, blah. What does it say? In local and personal. Travel should occur within an individual's local community or as necessary to access outdoor recreation areas. It's kind of fuzzy.
I saw a great graphic come out by Boulder County Public Health's Facebook page that was from the state that showed like you increase your risk. You know, you're starting here and you got just your local teams and you're just exposing among your local teams. And then the farther you travel, the greater the risk and the greater. It was just an interesting graphic.
Yeah, and while they don't speak to mileage in terms of distance, there's enough language in here that tries to highlight or heighten attention to this. So the next thing that it says is, if traveling outside their community, Coloradans are encouraged to honor all restrictions in place at their destination and avoid travel to counties or municipalities that issue travel restrictions. That piece is know where you're going and know what their local stuff is. So before you head anywhere, look up what county you're going to and understand what local things they have that they might have in place. For example, Boulder County has a more restrictive face covering requirement than the state. And so people are expected to know that. I'd like to just say under the outdoor recreation guidance, I think it goes on to state, I just gotta pull it up here real quick, that when you go, like for the outfitters and stuff, it says, when possible, this is for participants, so giving you some ideas. When possible, avoid using grocery stores, gas stations, etc. in the communities you visit to prevent the spread of COVID-19 across communities. Secure water, food, gas, and any other needed supplies in your home community. So again, they are being loose about your mileage, but they are giving lots of guidance to have you think and be very cautious about what kind of travel you're doing.
Well, and you mentioned a little bit earlier how some of our surrounding states are seeing peaks and increases in the COVID activity. While they may still have loosened restrictions, you may be exposing your athletes to increased COVID risk because of some of the trends that are happening in some of our neighbor states like Utah and Arizona, or if you're going East Coast, you got North Carolina and some of those that are seeing peaks right now.
Correct.
So being aware of what's going on wherever you're traveling. All right, so one person said
to really be like, it's your local league. It's not going to be going outside of your local league, depending on whatever that looks like. You're not going to be playing different leagues from different places. Is the intent of the order is that it stays within whatever that local league communities is.
At least in this first phase right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone said, sorry to mention this again, but the state guides for indoor sports states teams participating in organized recreation against one another and as a result experiencing greater contact should still observe the limit of 25 players, excluding coaches. Does Boulder differ with the 10?
Does Boulder differ with
or outdoor on youth on the sports teams?
I'm not sure I'm following the question. So
I'm not sure either.
So you said that recreation, sports teams and recreation, or sports teams, like a soccer team, when they're outside, they can have 25 people excluding coaches. And indoor, they can have 10 excluding coaches. Someone said that according to the rules, it says 25. Or it says 25 as well for indoor.
I think the difference is you have teams that are playing together up to 25 versus just the public who's coming into the gym. They're going to be maxed out at 10. The team piece is really where it's talking about the coaches. Like you're an organized group that is coming together to practice. That's up to 25.
Yep.
Those coming to play together that are more the public, who aren't necessarily coming together on an organized group. There's the difference in the two numbers.
Okay, so teams, sports teams participating in organized recreation against one another can have a limit of 25 excluding coaches, indoor and outdoor.
Correct.
Hopefully that clarifies that. All right, so maybe when do you expect another update about outdoor fitness classes or the state order, or maybe you could talk a little bit about when you expect, Boulder County to look at this variance. So let's start with the state order and let's talk about the variance.
Do you want me to do that, or?
Go ahead, Jesse. You've had to do it on all my other calls, so.
So we don't know when the state is going to issue updates. They sometimes give a couple days warning, and sometimes it's just we hear about it when you do. So the one thing I will say is that in this last round of updates, between the 4th, 5th, and 6th updates, there was a lot of reaction to comments from the public. So that comment link on the state website really does get a reaction if they see a reason, if they see a disconnect that they're trying to resolve. But in terms of the variance, we're going to move forward with our variance process, gathering information, drafting the variance, getting it approved locally, then getting it approved at the state, independent of those updates. And one of the things that that came up in the last session that I think is really important is we do not know, or I do not know, whether what happens when new guidance comes from the state when we have a variance that sort of sits over top of that. Because if you consider the variance sort of a local public health order, I think the way to think about it is the stricter rules. So if, for example, the state were to loosen things even further than our variance, we would have to, as a local authority, consider how to address that quickly. But unfortunately, I can't give you a timeline for their updates, and our timeline for updating, for submitting and getting a variance approved is at least 2 weeks, and likely more, because we need time to develop that and get it approved locally.
I think an example would be Broomfield got their variance literally the day the new public health order came out, and their variance was allowing things, and now the new public health order was now allowing. So there's a lot of lessons learned that you guys can talk about,
Right.
But also there's a lot of this logistics trying to figure that out. How do mask orders within the municipalities impact these variances and so forth?
I think it's, that's why we're trying to gather information using this online tool that has not come out yet, the comment form, because what we're trying to do is get as much information as possible. And that'll serve two purposes. One, we'll be able to harmonize as best we can mask orders with our variants so that it makes sense across the board if we can do that. The other thing is the goal of the variance is not to, increase from 10 to 25 here and add from 25% to 50% here. It's to create an across the board, simplified, more easily understandable set of standards that we won't have to have long conversations about 25% capacity or up to this, or it'll be, the goal is to have a more streamlined set of requirements.
So I have two questions. They're getting to the nitty-gritty here. Again, some more numbers issues. Gatherings in outdoor settings such as parks allow for 25 people now, correct? And I think
no, it's actually 10 people, but so think about it. This is how I've had to think about it. A gathering of people that are all coming out together, 10 people. You could have 10 people in a park that are way far, there's another gathering somewhere else in the park, but your gathering is 10 people. Where you get the 25 is a playground can have up to 25 people, but has to conform, I believe, to some space requirements. And those 25 people might not be a gathering of 25 people. They're 25 individual families, or I shouldn't say individual families, but a parent and a child at a playground. And I think that's you have to think about it in that way.
And then organized sports, it's a little, think about it differently there. And there's, as you can see, like we're all sitting here, it's so confusing for businesses, but that's why there's these calls. That's why that's that address. Let's look at those rules. I think this webpage was even updated since last week.
Well, it is. I mean, some of the one guidance, the state has a public health order guidance, which is they have the public health order, which is the straight up order. And then they've got some guidance of their own that is all bulleted lists per sector. And that was updated since last night.
Yeah, because some of the language has changed, because I think some of the things in your PowerPoint were actually, as of yesterday even. Right. So keeping track of that and making sure that we're not waiting for someone to, the website is something you need to continue to look at and update, because they make tweaks. This question was asked last week, and I'm not sure if you guys were able to get the answer. Can gyms reopen childcare services?
So yeah, I saw that come in, and the state site has a area that just speaks to childcare facilities, and they talk about it being both licensed and unlicensed. So the guidance is for licensed and license exempt childcare centers. And that would probably be what the gym would essentially be. So I would encourage you, who's asking the question, to go to the state website on the Safer at Home, and then look down your left menu, and it talks about childcare facilities, and there's guidance that speaks to it. But the read is that yes, childcare facilities, and what it says is they operate under the Department of Human Services licensed capacity and group size. I'm not going to pretend to know that we know what those are here.
But so just like the county point person for all things childcare, so we can connect them to the right point person as needed. And if nothing else, they can just email the COVID biz and we'll get them connected to the right person who's all thing childcare.
So just like manufacturing facilities have offices, so they have to follow both checklists, or personal services may have retail and they have to follow both. In some cases, gyms have personal training, they have gyms, and they have childcare. So they're going to have to look at the guidance for those three different areas.
Or retail too. I mean, yeah. So.
And retail, if you have retail and you're selling goods within your gym. So there's a lot more sections. We can send you the website. There's checklists for those and resources for the other sections, but you may fall into more than one category, and therefore the question though is, would childcare staff and children count against your 50 max at the rec center or not, since it's in a separate room?
It would not, because it's in a separate room. If you look at the indoor gym guidance, the limit of 25% of capacity, or 50 people, whichever is fewer, is per room. So now those people, the childcare facility would have to maintain at whatever the childcare rules say in that room. And if that is more than the 25% capacity, that's a special case because it's a childcare facility and it would fall under the childcare rules.
Okay, but it's not going to count against, so someone bringing their 2 kids in is now not going to be 3 people in the workout room if those children are going off into a separate childcare facility.
And this is a question that comes up with every business, every facility. Excuse me. When you're walking through a shared space, regardless of what your eventual goal is, you count towards the number of people allowed in that shared space while you're in that space. And that's why there are signs on buildings that say, 3 people in the room at a time. You do have to think about your shared space and the number of people who have to pass through that shared space to use all of the rooms that are accessory to that shared space.
But Cami, you've talked about on personal services calls, they may be able to utilize other doors to direct traffic, those people that have children, to go into this door to the child care facility first, or
Correct.
trying to direct traffic.
I highly recommend looking at reconfiguring your spaces and maybe using doors, entrances and exits, 1, to bottleneck those shared spaces, but 2, to create more spaces and to turn more spaces into usable spaces. That if you can use doors that aren't typically otherwise used to create separate entrances for certain classes, or certain, childcare comes in here, general public comes in here, or this class enters here, that's going to make the space a much more usable option. Especially since, you have to basically, if you have one large gym, that is considered a space unless you can close it off with 4 walls and doors. So there might be some external doors you can use, as long as you can kind of create the solid wall structures, depending on what it is. But spaces are getting creative at finding non-typical door use to really increase their usable area.
Great. I think you guys are off the hot seat. That's all the questions. Oh, wait, we have another one. So sorry. So while we're answering this one, I'm gonna actually launch this poll real quick.
And Marnie, you were right about for the outdoor tours, it's 2 families.
Yeah.
Just because yep.
Okay, so for outdoor guided tours, can you have multiple groups of 10 with 1 guide per group while maintaining social distancing between the groups, such as multiple guided hiking groups or a few rafts launching and floating at about the same time?
I guess I would consider, as long as you have your groups separated and there's no crossing between those groups, that it's almost like you don't know that you're not with that group. They're 2 separate groups. You're talking about a guide for one group, a guide for another group, not one guide that does both groups.
1 guide per group. I think one of the things is the rafts may be launching around the same time, so making sure to space those out to maintain the social distancing between the groups.
Yeah, I would say that and again, I think what we you want to definitely understand what the guidance is, and maybe not try to read too much into it. So it's groups of 10, I would stick with that.
Okay. So are there any more questions out there? I'm gonna launch one more poll. Okay, while we're answering that, I want to thank the 4 of you from Boulder County Public Health for joining us today. There were definitely a lot of new information, a lot of clarifications, and more clarifications to come. Again, we'll be sending out the link to be able to provide feedback outside of the regular email address on potential variances. And please continue to participate. The Thursday sessions are just Jesse and I trying to answer questions that come up during the week. There's not a formal presentation. A lot easier to do some of the live Q&A that way too. It's a little harder when we have these larger webinars. But if you want to do some live Q&A and discussions, and look at the Thursday session at 1 o'clock. We have recordings of all these sessions, including the Spanish sessions. Transparency with your staff is always very important. And if you have Spanish speaking staff that need to understand these rules and requirements, now they may not go into detail of the outdoor rec, but they're covering general requirements. And we have those tapings that we provide. Between now and next Tuesday, you have additional questions, please send them to the email address that's on the screen. Or if I'm the only email address you can find, I've found my way to forward those as well. And then we will see you next week. Have a great week. Good luck in your reopening, and I hope you find some success in this coming week.
Thanks, Corinne.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne.
Thanks, everybody.